It is important
at this time
for us to
do the safe thing
and protect those around us.
That's why
when it is my turn,
I will be taking the vaccine.
The British Empire hasn't really existed since the late 60s. However, the empire didn't disappear without leaving a long-lasting legacy on the geopolitical landscape of today. A legacy that led to the creation of the Commonwealth of Nations. The Commonwealth of Nations is an association of 54 independent and sovereign states, most of which are former territories of the British Empire. With a conjoined land area of 11.5 million square miles and 2.4 billion people, the Commonwealth contains approximately 20% of the world's land and 32% of the world's inhabitants. This massive association is unique on the world stage, with its roots in British imperialism. At its height, the largest empire the world had ever seen, the decline of the British Empire led to political turmoil and unrest throughout its formerly colonized regions, particularly outside of its mostly white colonies like Canada and Australia. These colonies would be the first to see change, being promoted to dominion status throughout the late 19th century and early 20th century. This meant they had more independence over their own affairs, while still ultimately being under the authority of the Crown. Canada would be the first to become a dominion in 1867, followed by Australia in 1901, New Zealand and Newfoundland in 1907, South Africa in 1910, and Ireland in 1922, the leaders of which would attend the 1926 Imperial Conference. At this conference, Britain and its dominions agreed that they would all be equal members of the British Empire, meaning, despite all owing allegiance to the Crown, they would not be ruled by the United Kingdom. The powers at this conference decided on the name British Commonwealth of Nations to describe their newly formed organization, the first form of what we now know as the Commonwealth of Nations today. This agreement would be formalized in the Statute of Westminster in 1931, allowing the Commonwealth to take shape. It is notable to point out that, at the time of the Imperial Conference, the British Empire included vast areas of land in Africa, much of the Middle East, the entirety of Pakistan and India, as well as several other regions across the world, while the only territories represented at the Imperial Conference were the predominantly white members of the British Empire, leading many to refer to this early form of the Commonwealth as the White Commonwealth. The newly formed British Commonwealth of Nations would only exist in this form for a relatively brief period. Britain's colonies not included in the early Commonwealth began to seek further separation and even independence from the British, beginning with India in 1947. India would become a part of the Commonwealth initially. However, upon announcing intentions to sever ties with the Crown and become a republic in 1949, it would no longer meet the requirements for Commonwealth membership. It was because of India's switch to a republican form of government that, at a meeting of Commonwealth leaders in 1949, it was decided that member states may be in the Commonwealth if they accepted the British Crown as a symbol of free association between member states, meaning India could remain in the Commonwealth. Along with this change, it was decided that the British Commonwealth of Nations would drop the British in its title, becoming the Commonwealth of Nations we know today. Pakistan and Sri Lanka would also be Commonwealth members by 1949. The Irish Free State, one of the founding members of the original British Commonwealth, would withdraw from the Commonwealth at this time as well, meaning this is what the new Commonwealth of Nations looked like as of 1949. The number of Commonwealth nations would increase greatly throughout the next several decades. However, it did not come without its issues. 2 other member states, on top of Ireland, would leave the Commonwealth. Firstly, the founding member South Africa in 1961, and later Pakistan in 1972. Both of these, however, would rejoin, the first being Pakistan, rejoining after 17 years in 1989, and the second, South Africa, rejoining after 33 years in 1994. Mozambique, joining in 1995, was the first nation to join the Commonwealth of Nations that was not at some point under British control, but rather Portuguese control as a colony. Today, the Commonwealth of Nations has 54 member states across the world. with the most recent addition being Rwanda in November of 2009. While, since 1949, Commonwealth members have been allowed to choose their head of state freely, many Commonwealth nations continue to observe the Queen as a reigning constitutional monarch. These 16 nations are all members of the Commonwealth of Nations, and are collectively known as the Commonwealth realm. These nations include, among others, Canada, Jamaica, the UK, Australia, Papua New Guinea, and New Zealand. The Commonwealth of Nations is one of the largest associations of countries in the world today, and exists to serve the economic, social, and political needs of its member states, from some of the world's largest economies to countless developing nations, and is an interesting result of British imperialism.
Good afternoon and welcome to our Commonwealth celebrations. This time last year, when we done the Commonwealth celebrations, they were in St Andrew's Art Centre in Gravesend. But unfortunately, obviously this year, it's online. Fingers crossed, next year we'll be back together in person. From myself, Govinda Sanda, and from the two organisations I represent, the Kent Equality Cohesion Council and Cohesion Plus, a very genuine and warm welcome. Special warm welcome to some of our key partners: Kent County Council, colleagues from Gratian Borough Council, Dartford Borough Council, got colleagues from local schools, including St George's, and also the Deputy Lord Lieutenant, and community partners. So generally, thank you very much. I mean, as you would have just seen now, you know, the Commonwealth, we talk about the Commonwealth, and it's really kind of sometimes, maybe this time of year, people really think about how big the Commonwealth is, and the fact 54 countries, 2.4 billion population. And I think another interesting stat is about 1 in 3 people aged between 15 and 29 in the whole world are from the Commonwealth. So, you know, when we talk about the Commonwealth, it's not just big in terms of numbers, but it's also big in terms of young people that age 15 to 29 age group. And the theme this year, you know, with the regards to the Commonwealth Day is around common future, about highlighting how the Commonwealth family are innovating, are connecting and transforming. And, you know, if you think about that, you think about innovation, connecting and transforming, that can really be looked at also at a local level here in Kent. And, you know, this is a particular reason why we're online, and it's obviously because of the impact of COVID. And that impact really, you know, is felt across all communities, and not just here in Kent or the UK, but across the world. And so, you know, at a time like this, I think it's important that not only that we remember the Commonwealth, but we also celebrate the Commonwealth. And that's why the theme of this year's event, that over the next hour or so you'll see, we're celebrating the contribution made by members who got links to the Commonwealth, and the contribution they make to everyday lives there. And we're focusing particularly around policing, health, and education. Now, yesterday, when I was in town, I got this 50p coin, and it says on it, diversity built Britain. And that is why not only the Commonwealth, and that's why events like this are so important. You know, wherever we come from, whatever our faith, we all have a shared history. And, you know, this is really captured by the diversity of the Commonwealth. And, you know, you look at Britain today, you look at Kent today, I'm always very proud to say that I'm from Kent, that I was born in Gravesend. And, you know, we work here, you know, across the county. And the reason I'm proud, because despite the challenges we face, be it with the pandemic or other kind of social issues that, you know, we faced as a county, as a country, you know, over many, many years, we've always prided ourselves on our positive community relations. And that is, I think a lot of that's due to the strong leadership that comes, not just from faith or charitable organizations, but also local authority partners as well. Also organizations like Kent Police, the universities, the local schools. And it's that kind of partnership which I think has allowed us here in Kent to be a beacon. And so, you know, when we think about the Commonwealth, I think about the positive contribution made by people from, you know, here in Kent to everyday kind of lives. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. Some of you may be aware, obviously, over the weekend, there was some racist graffiti put at the Sikh temple here in Gravesend, which has kind of gone national and international. A lot of people have picked up upon that. But I think the key thing to look at is that was a minority. And what's really given me hope and kind of reinforce this message about us here in Kent is the number of positive messages that have come, have been on social media, through phone calls, through messages. And that's what Kent's about. Kent is about us all being together, having those shared values and, you know, having those shared history, and we're working together. And something I always say, that as an organization, that we're stronger together. There's more that unites than divides us. And I think testament to the work we do in Gresham, Dartford, Maidstone, Tunbridge Wells, Tunbridge Moorling, you know, the work we do at Kent County Council, Gresham, Dartford Borough Councils, Kent Police, that is kind of underlined over and over again. So thank you very much for joining us. It'd be remiss also for me not to mention that's also International Women's Day. And, you know, we're very blessed here again in Kent to have some really inspiring and brilliant leaders. And I would like to give a special thanks to some of my community colleagues, Sonia Naya, who works with me, Carol Gossel from Rethink, Corbier Pasricha from Kent Police, and Michelle Bramble, who works for Kent County Council, but also is the chair of the North Kent Caribbean Network. And I'm really lucky myself personally to be able to work with these fantastic women, but also as a community, I think we're lucky to have their leadership. So without too much further ado, I would like to now introduce Michelle Bramble, who's worked with us on this event, who's the chair of the North Kent Caribbean Network.
Thank you, Govinda, and hello and welcome to today's event, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. As Govinda has just said, this is not our first Commonwealth event, and each one has its challenges. Usually we're trying to make sure that we've got enough food for everyone. This year it will be the technology, so please bear with us if the technology is a little bit slow. To say that the past 12 months has been a challenge is an understatement. And it's hard to believe that this time last year, we were finalising what would become our last face-to-face event to celebrate Commonwealth Day in 2020. At that event, we were able to honour key figures within the local community and share the message of tolerance, respect and understanding and dignity for all. Now today, as Govinda said, also marks International Women's Day, a day dedicated to celebrating the women who inspire us and women leadership across the globe. So to start today's programme, we'll be sharing two videos with you. The first is a message about International Women's Day from the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland QC, who is the second Secretary General of the Commonwealth from the Caribbean and the first woman to ever hold the post. In the second video, produced by the National Army Museum, we'll hear how many people feel conflicted when talking about the Commonwealth, mainly because of its links to the British Empire. And that's a video titled, "What Does the Commonwealth and the British Empire Mean to You?" I hope you enjoy today's programme. Thank you.
Our Commonwealth family has always stood together in times of adversity. And as COVID-19 continues to cause immense suffering and loss around the world and across every part of our societies, we must acknowledge that its impacts, while felt by everyone, has been far more devastating for many women and girls. This is why we, as the Commonwealth, will continue our work in addressing the systemic injustices that hold women back. But for me, achieving gender equality must not always be a battle. It must also be a celebration of the women in our communities who, despite all odds, provide positive and visionary leadership, especially during this terrible pandemic. So, as an act of celebration, we want to ask you, which woman in your life inspires you? For me, whilst I am inspired all the time by so many women and girls, I would like to name 3 phenomenal leaders in our Commonwealth. That's Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, for their leadership during COVID-19 in their roles in their respective countries. All 3, alongside so many other women, have given me hope for a world that delivers a common future for women and men and serves all of our common good. So I want to ask you to join me in celebrating women's leadership in homes, communities and governments ahead of International Women's Day by telling the world who inspires you. You can do this by following 2 simple steps. First, post on social media a short video of yourself mentioning a woman who has inspired you. Second, in your post, tag 3 people to do the same and use the hashtag #SheLeadsTheWay. Let's take this opportunity to inspire each other to aspire to a more equal future.
The British Empire means to me unity, friendship, fellowship, and to be united.
I guess you would call me a child of the empire because all 4 of my grandparents were born in India when it was under British rule. My mum was born in Kenya when it was under British rule. My father was born in Tanzania when it was under British rule. And then I am a Brit born in London. So I guess I'm a child of the empire.
I think the British Empire is something that is mainly from the past. It's from a time where we decided to go out and conquer the world for resources. I think we had about 1/3 of the world at one point.
When I hear the word British Empire, I think of slavery.
It's nostalgia. It's about over 400 or 500 years of history, which for my family and for myself is very personal.
You know, we used to sing the national anthem, and we would touch on, you know, National Remembrance Day and things like that, and know what it's about, who we were fighting, who our soldiers fought for, and I think that always stuck in the back of my mind growing up.
The huge empire Britain had, I think at one time, was almost 25% of the landmass of the planet, which is incredible really when you think about it.
How the British changed the whole world.
A section of people that conquered the world.
Taking what is naturally belongs to another country from them to, you know, to make money. Money is a big one.
The British Empire, to me, means invasion, it means riches, it means the foundation upon which, to a great extent, this country's wealth is based on.
It's our heritage, isn't it? It's what my grandfather was involved in, what my great-grandfather was involved in. It's where we get what we are today.
British Empire means to me the British taking over other countries and ruling them.
You know, overuse of resources.
I didn't do too much of it at school, and I think that would be nice if people could really learn a little bit more about what the empire means to people, not just what the empire was.
But I think in general, I don't really like to call it an empire anymore. I think that the empire is now over.
The Commonwealth basically means a number of countries that come together, probably either by volunteering or it could be during the colonial rule.
The connotations of that word are so much more important and so much more relevant and so much more inspiring than empire. So it's kind of post-empire, what do you do with that? And Commonwealth seems to have done something very good with it.
For all the fighting we did for them, that we should still remember them a little bit.
The countries that helped Britain for the World War I.
The countries which maybe have certain histories in common and do things together as one.
So that's what the Commonwealth means. You can be associated with our richness, but you can't have any of yours back.
Thing whereby the British tried to pay back perhaps for some of the naughty things they've done over the years.
Because we have an advantage over many other countries, that we have learned from it, and we have such a diverse population nowadays.
We're here because of them. If they weren't here, we wouldn't be here actually.
Left, right, left, 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 right, left, left.
We felt it was worth sharing that because, you know, when we talk about Commonwealth, we talk about empire. I think it's really important to just try to understand kind of people's kind of views around that. And talk from my point of view, when we talk about the Commonwealth, I think we should see it as a strength. We need to see it as a a positive kind of celebration, similar to what we're doing today. Now, the next element of the program will be featuring some of our local partners and celebrating some of the positive contribution made by colleagues with links to the Commonwealth. And before we get into that, now I would like to introduce two of our civic guests. So the leader of Kent County Council, Councillor Roger Goff, and he'll be followed by Deputy Lord Lieutenant Vasudavan, who will be speaking on behalf of the Lord Lieutenant of Kent.
This is Roger Goff, leader of Kent County Council, and I'm delighted to be able to make a small contribution to these Commonwealth Day celebrations. We have, I think, good and long traditions in Kent of our communities coming together, and we've seen that to a huge degree over this last year. We've actually used the phrase Kent Together, and I think it means something not just in response to the COVID crisis, but also in terms of the way that we live and work together as a county. We also have many traditions within the county of Kent residents, Kent citizens of Commonwealth origin, making a strong contribution to our county and to the life that we have here together. You see that very much in our public services. Certainly if we look across areas where the county council is deeply involved in education, in social services, in the support for children and for both vulnerable and older people, then the contribution of our citizens and our staff from Commonwealth backgrounds is very strong indeed. This is a great occasion today to celebrate something that does bring us together. I'm very delighted to play a part in it. And I know that you'll be hearing from other colleagues from across our public services who do reflect the great contribution that all our citizens and our citizens from Commonwealth backgrounds make to public services and to the lives of our communities here in Kent. I'm very glad to be part of that, and I hope that this celebration goes very well indeed and is another occasion for marking how we can live and work as Kent together.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Gurvinder, for kindly inviting me today to celebrate the positive contributions made by Commonwealth personnel to Kent. I'm here on behalf of our Lord Lieutenant, Lady Colgrane, who, as you know, is Her Majesty the Queen's representative in the County of Kent. I bring to you her best wishes. First of all, I would like to thank all those of Commonwealth origin, especially our veterans and those who served there for their immense contributions over so many years. As we celebrate Commonwealth Day today, as a symbol of our unity and working towards world peace, we in Gravesham can also be very proud of our diversity and community cohesion over many years. And thank you, Gurvinder, for doing that and keeping at it over all this time. Through our Commonwealth connections, friendships, and cooperation, I was appointed as one of the Deputy Lieutenants in Kent in 2013 to a Lord Lieutenant, and continued to serve liaising with our Borough Council and Kent Lieutenancy. The Deputy Lieutenant's role is a great privilege and above all a pleasure to go about meeting some amazing people from all backgrounds and see so many charities at work, thanking, helping, and bringing people together wherever I can for the benefit of our community. At a time of increasing instability and uncertainty in the world, the Commonwealth nations, 54 of them, can be very proud that the rich diversity and shared values continues to be a source of great strength and hope for all its members. As we live in a multicultural world seeking peace, unity, understanding, and tolerance, this celebration of Commonwealth Day helps us reflect and remember those people who spent their lives serving the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our civic guests. And now is the first of 3 short films that we've made working with local colleagues here in Kent talking about the contribution. So the first one focuses on policing, and it features Corbett Pasricha and Detective Superintendent Sean White.
So my parents were born in India, and following much hardship in the partition of India in 1947, they left their homes and belongings in Jurgana, which is Farrukhabad in Pakistan. They fled to Delhi. They faced much hardship and came to the UK in 1964, just for £2.50 to start a new life here. I was born in 1971. In 1998, I decided to take a lateral move to Kent County Constabulary in those days, and it was for 6 months. And amazingly, now 23 years later, I'm still here and I'm still looking to work much more. So my passion and what I thoroughly enjoy about working in Kent Police is making that difference with the communities. It's understanding what their needs are, and by doing like cultural awareness sessions and actually being there at the grassroots level, speaking at various conferences, whether it's women's issues, whether it's different communities, it gives me a better understanding, my colleagues, the chance to operate in that area of fairness, respect and understanding for each other. My huge satisfaction has been making a difference, not just to society, but also the wider policing family. In fact, every contact I make. So knowing what I can do is about constantly pushing those boundaries, that there's never it's not the case of actually we can't do more, there's always more we can do. I wanted to be part of a legacy for Kent Police, and hence why I continued. And that legacy involves the communities and how we work together. We stand together, we have unity, and there's that strength in that. The vision I have is that obviously whether it's for hate crime, whether it's on the community side, is about working together and making sure we have a unity and strength. My other passion about joining Kent Police was about being a role model and actually encouraging other people in the communities to see what they can do and what difference they can make to policing, which is much more tangible when you're actually on the inside. So in terms of career challenges I've faced, I came into Kent Police when in fact, I think communities didn't have that trust and confidence in policing. So hence why that was a challenge for me in itself. And career-wise, I know that within my family and communities, I always wanted, someone to be a doctor or accountant. However, I chose policing, and I'm so, so glad I did. Today's a Commonwealth Day, and I think it's very important we celebrate Commonwealth Day. It's a celebration of global connections across the 54 states and 2.4 billion citizens, highlighting the importance of our Commonwealth links and togetherness. It's so important when during the pandemic, many have felt very isolated. And when you look at the diversity of these countries, which do consist of rich, the poor, various cultures and faiths, then this day actually unites us. The day shows what we can achieve with a focus. It shows what we can achieve with a cohesive vision, and where unity is our strength. I'm really proud to represent Kent Police today to speak around Commonwealth Day, and I think it's, we've made huge positive strides in how we've actually encouraged communities, the diverse communities of Kent and Medway, to come and join us, make a difference. But importantly, we want to continue to do this, and I'm just very grateful for the opportunity and continue to be proud to working with Kent Police.
My name is Sean White, Detective Superintendent for County Lines and the Gangs team of Kent Police. I was born in 1973, East London, Forest Gate. My dad came here in 1970 and my mum came here in 1968. And they both originate from the same parish in Barbados, St John. My mum's family particularly come from a background of farming, where they grew up farming and living off the land. From college, I went on to join NatWest Bank. I joined NatWest at 18 years old. From NatWest Bank, I just knew this was a stepping stone to joining the police service. And I remember that the applications were advertised in the newspapers, and I used to sit on the tube going to work. And it was at that one moment that I thought to myself, now's the time for me to go. I've got 12 serving relatives who are police officers in Barbados, and I've got relatives who are police officers in Bermuda. And I think as a child, my dad just drip fed it into my mind that it was going to be my calling. And I at 20 years old, I put my application in. I was successful for the first part. And then there was a second part of the application where you had to write an essay about what person was the most important to you in your life. And I chose Nelson Mandela. I wrote an essay about him and how he was inspirational. And then I was successful. From Charing Cross, I went on to join the Territorial Support Group, and that's the riot police in the Metropolitan Police Service. And that was good because I think that gave me a really good, strong background in policing, leadership. And then I decided to do a completely different change completely. I decided that I wanted to challenge myself considerably. And I decided to become a close protection officer. So from that, I spent 6 months initially with working with the royal family. And then I decided to move on to go and work for the ministerial side. And I was selected to work for a former Prime Minister, David Cameron. So I spent 18 months with Mr. Cameron, and I had the opportunity to travel around the world, or travel the UK. And I think that's first opportunity where I decided that further on in my career, I'd like the opportunity to work in another police force in the UK. What actually pushed me to go and join Kent Police was the Chief Constable. Very inspirational, very charismatic, and he says what he means, and authentic leadership. So the opportunity came to apply for Kent Police, and that's where I am today, working on the Kent County Lines and Gangs team. I think the only real changes I would say is about having to work really hard in policing. I think to get where I have now, Detective Superintendent, I've worked extremely hard to get there. And if I do choose to progress further, I will work really hard. I'm passionate about policing. I'm passionate about working with communities. I'm passionate about working in partnership. I think the most hardest challenges I would say I have faced is trying to get into close protection. It's only 30% nationally get into that, and that was my hardest challenge in policing so far. So Commonwealth Day to me is really important. I think it's the opportunity for us to celebrate different communities from across the globe who've settled in the UK, and I think that's so important. It brings us together with a history that we've all can relate to. And I say the most important thing is it's just recognising the contribution that different people have made to the UK to make it what it is today.
In the next videos, we'll be highlighting the contribution made by Commonwealth soldiers during conflict. The first video is produced by the National Army Museum, and the second was produced by Govinda and Sonia from the Kent Equality Cohesion Council and Cohesion Plus, and was first shown to commemorate Remembrance Day.
Some people would have just felt compelled to fight for Britain, maybe because other people around them were fighting. Certain people would have felt an affiliation to Britain if they were British descendants.
And they want to fight for our future because they know that it will help in future. That's why they want to keep history going.
Yeah, so they basically fought for us. I mean, that was an amazing thing for them to do. I don't know if they had much choice in doing it, but certainly they really helped in all of those wars, and I think their kind of assistance for that should be recognised more probably than it is now.
To be part of something, but also for the greater good in a sense.
And the belief that if we help you out, you will give us our freedom. And in that respect, there was a betrayal.
When people are not educated, they were led to participate in the mother country.
Back then, if you're from a poorer background, the army's would seem to be a great idea.
I think the troops 100 years ago came together because they knew how important it was for Britain to stand together as one with other nations to help each other.
They obviously seen what was happening and they wanted to play a part. I think it's just just the true testament of what our country's people have been about.
They were great ancestors. That's why we are here now enjoying this Mila.
For me, those countries that help to volunteer with Britain because they will probably get something out of it.
People didn't. If people knew what they were going to be doing, I'm not sure so many people would have fought. But people had a very much like a national pride and really wanted. They thought that there was a big threat to their country, so they volunteered for it that way.
So I think soldiers themselves are honourable people, but I do also think sometimes they're manipulated into those positions, as we see that after they've come back from fighting their wars, often they're not looked after by their state, they're not honoured in any other way other than a few little metal badges.
Money, I guess. You know, they liked the attraction of getting paid to go abroad, and then maybe some of them were for pride, I guess.
They had very beyond belief of people today, especially people my age, who can't comprehend having to drop everything in your life to go and to fight for someone who you didn't even necessarily know or know why you were fighting.
Because we offered them freedom in return.
They must have formed very close bonds and relationships, and they felt some sort of connection to the British Empire and what it stood for.
But some people would have just done it because their best friend was doing it. So there would have been so many different reasons. And I don't think it's always easy to understand why.
We need a help from each other, neighboring country, to protect ourselves and our neighboring country.
My guess is that they probably weren't fighting for king and country, yeah.
I don't know, to be quite honest. I don't know.
And I think they knew that the cause that they were fighting for was something worthwhile.
I think these people fought alongside the British because they believe in one common thing, and that is peace and stability.
Remembrance Sunday is an important time of reflection and gratitude as we remember the countless sacrifices made by those before us during both the First and Second World Wars. It's especially important that we remember those souls that history has overlooked for so long and recognise the vast contribution made by the countries from the Commonwealth. This film will focus on the contribution made by Commonwealth soldiers from the Caribbean, the Indian subcontinent and Africa. The Guru Nanak Darbar Gurdwara is based in the borough of Gresham in North Kent, which is about 30 miles outside of London and is one of the largest Sikh Gurdwara in Europe. The Gurdwara has a permanent exhibition covering the contribution made by Sikh soldiers during the two world wars. Around 1.2 million soldiers from the Indian subcontinent enlisted to fight in World War I. Around 75,000 Indian soldiers died during the First World War and a similar amount were wounded. India contributed a number of divisions and brigades to the Eastern Mediterranean, North African, East African and the European theatres of war. In Europe, Indian soldiers were among the first victims who suffered the horrors of the trenches. It wasn't just the soldiers from the Indian subcontinent that made a significant contribution. At a time when we celebrate the Windrush generation, the sacrifice of the soldiers from the Caribbean who fought in World War I is often forgotten. Around 15,000 West Indians enlisted, including 10,000 from Jamaica. In 1915, Britain's War Office, which was initially opposed to the recruitment of West Indian soldiers, agreed to accept volunteers from the West Indies. A new regiment was formed, the British West Indian Regiment, which served in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. The formation of the BWIR did not give soldiers from the West Indies the opportunity to fight as equals initially alongside the white soldiers. Instead, their participation was largely limited to labour duties. The soldiers from the BWIR were used in different support roles on the Western Front, including the digging of trenches, building of roads, acting as stretcher bearers and loading ships and trains. This work was often carried out within the range of German artillery and snipers. It was not until 1916 that the War Office relaxed its opposition to using the BWIR in combat. African troops played a key role in containing the Germans in East Africa during World War I. By 1918, the British Army in East Africa was mainly composed of African soldiers who were enlisted from Malawi, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Kenya and Uganda. Black African soldiers were largely restricted to logistical roles as the South African government feared arming them. However, an additional 25,000 black South Africans were recruited to the South African Native Labour Contingent that served on the Western Front in 1916 and 1917. As we all know, the First World War was not the war that ended all wars, and from 1939 we were in conflict again. And the soldiers from the Commonwealth were called to arms once more to fight for king and country. a country which for whom the majority will never have had the opportunity to visit. Squadron leader Mahinder Singh Puji was the longest surviving fighter pilot from a group of 24 Indians who arrived in Britain in 1940 and fought bravely in the Battle of Britain. Puji campaigned for many years to raise awareness of the Indian contribution to the British war effort, which he, like many veterans, believed had largely been ignored. This statue of Squadron Leader Puji was made by the sculptor Douglas Jennings and was unveiled in November 2014 in the borough of Gravesham, where Mr. Puji lived the last years of his life. Around 1.5 million soldiers from the Indian subcontinent, including 400,000 Indian Muslim soldiers, alongside 134,000 soldiers from Africa and the Caribbean, were enlisted to fight in World War II. It's widely believed by historians that had soldiers from the Commonwealth stayed where they were, the history of the world would have looked so vastly different. In today's Britain, a society is massively diverse and made up of many cultures and ethnicities. And it's especially important to note that the armies that fought side by side in both World War I and World War II were just as diverse. That's why it's so important now, more than ever, to remember a history that truly reflects the many sacrifices and contributions made by soldiers from the Caribbean, the Indian subcontinent, and Africa during the World Wars. And to also acknowledge the fact that we wouldn't be here today enjoying the freedoms that we do if it wasn't for those brave souls laying down their lives for us. So that was a celebration, obviously remembering the soldiers who fought so bravely in the World Wars. So now, obviously, being quite apt, being Monday, March the 8th, and schools reopened, we're also now going to be celebrating the contribution made from colleagues from the Commonwealth to local education. Great pleasure of introducing two short videos. First video is around featuring the head teacher from Holy Trinity School, Denise Gibbs Nagar, who Holy Trinity is a very diverse school here in Gravesham. And after that, there'll be another short video celebrating the contribution that the Commonwealth have made to the NHS. And I think that's particularly apt at this time with the COVID pandemic.
I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the Caribbean and which is also part of the Commonwealth as well. We came to the UK in 2001. In fact, my husband saw an advertisement for teachers in London and he said to me, why not apply? Prior to me arriving in England, I was an advanced level chemistry teacher in Trinidad and Tobago. I also taught a bit of mathematics as well. I transitioned into primary school whilst doing a leadership course at Lillian Baylis Technology School. Prior to this role, I was the head teacher at Hunton Church of England Primary School in Maidstone. When I started that school, they were on the brink of much difficulties, let's just say that. And I was able to turn the fortunes of the school around. So when that happened, I started craving a new challenge. And I saw the advertisement for a head teacher post at Holy Trinity. And the job description just sounded just like me. It was, it called out to me. And so I applied. The school was in a very difficult place. The school had been requires improvement or judged by Ofsted as requiring improvement for 6 consecutive years. And so the local authority were quite keen on improving the outcomes at the next Ofsted, and so too were the governors. When Ofsted turned up 18 months after my appointment, we were graded good in all areas. In fact, in leadership and management, we tipped into the outstanding category. So that was a very proud moment for myself and for the school community as well. Holy Trinity School is a wonderfully diverse community. In fact, it's one of the most diverse schools that I've worked in. So we have children, I would say, from all over the globe at Holy Trinity. Such a beautiful mixture of children. There are over 30 different languages, home languages spoken at our school. And I think it's the richness of that diversity that has fostered a sense of community and family and respect for each other. It's just a very unique and special place. When we celebrate Commonwealth Day and its celebration, just reminds me of the founding premise behind the whole organization or institution, which is about fostering, good relationships and collaborations between countries, and those countries are made up of diverse individuals. And more than that, it shows that how much we can achieve when we work together, despite or in spite of our differences, our unique characteristics. So it reminds me about the strength in unity, and not necessarily unity having the same perspective, but of purpose.
I was born in India, in Madras, and I did my primary schooling in a Catholic convent school in Madurai, which is the tip of India, and did my secondary schooling in Bombay and medical schooling in Bombay. I served in the slums of Bombay for 1 year as a volunteer, vaccinating people and looking after them. And then my father came to me and said, look, I didn't put you through all the medical education to do this forever. So I went off to Africa looking for work. I was working at the border of Zambia and Rhodesia got its independence in 1980. And it was a terrible place to live in and work at that time. And so I came to UK to further my education and studies. I phoned up my surgeon who trained me in Zambia and said, do you know anybody who can help me with getting a job? And he said, go and see Mr. Neville Stevens in Joyce Green Hospital, Dartford. So I got a train, came down, had an interview, told him I would like to work with him as a volunteer for 6 weeks so that he can make an assessment. And after 6 weeks assessment, he gave me the job. That's how I started in Dartford. And the first job was in Gravesend Hospital as a casualty officer, working 12-hour shifts every other day. And the reason I became a GP was I was working with Mr. Jackson, one of the cancer specialists in Norwich. And he said to me, you know, Vasu, you are a very good guy, but you do realize if you want to become a cancer surgeon, it is very difficult, because out of medical school intake in Cambridge every year, out of 250 students, one of them would want to be a cancer surgeon. But he said, you love people and you love your work. Why don't you become a GP? There were 200 applicants for 5 GP jobs in Gravesend at that time. My career highlights I would sum up by becoming a surgeon from the Royal College of Edinburgh at the age of 29 was quite a privilege. Being appointed as a GP in King's Farm area post Second World War, Caucasian, mainly Caucasian area was very, very interesting working challenge, creating a new model of general practice where I thought, what's the point in me managing the building, the electrics, the plumbing? I just want to be a good doctor. So I wrote to the government in 1997. Mr. Blair was a prime minister at that time and said, look, I want a salaried GP job. I don't want to be a GP as a businessman or an independent contractor. I just want to come and do my work as a doctor and go. So he said, why don't you pilot it? So I piloted a new model of general practice where the building and everything else, maintenance was taken over by somebody else. And all I did was the medical part of it. That gave me the freedom to create and be imaginative. And I created community partnerships, working with social services, schools, pharmacies, benefits advisor, and joint funding and collaborative working led to other practices joining up with me. And I became the chair of the Dartford Gravesend Swanley group of GPs commissioning group, which is now the new CCGs. The Prime Minister kindly invited me to number 10 to meet with me, and I was part of the Southeast Thames Modernization Task Force for 2 years, which led me on to identify gaps in local services. Every step has been difficult, but what makes it interesting is just as you find some difficulties and some people who are not very nice, purely because of competition, lack of information, education, whatever, you find 10 or a dozen more people who are ready to help. Multiple strangers have given me a helping hand and helped me along the way, of all nationalities. Commonwealth Day celebration is a symbol of our unity and working towards world peace. We in Gravesham can be very proud of our diversity and cohesion, which you have been very, instrumental in. And throughout with Commonwealth connections, friendships, and cooperation. And we live in a multicultural world, and all we want is peace, unity, understanding, and tolerance. The impact of climate change, the global economic interdependency, and now the impact of coronavirus have all underlined the importance of working together to deliver a better future. And that's the theme of this year, deliver a common future. And we all saw how it works so well with sharing the scientific skills, the COVID vaccine production, the mass vaccination programs, how we can do it. And at a time of increasing world instability, economically, the Commonwealth family of nations, with its rich diversity and shared values, gives its members a great strength and hope for the future.
Thank you. We're nearly finished now. Just a couple of short, more local contributions. So some of you obviously will have seen the messaging throughout the event. We're working very closely with the Kent Community Health Foundation Trust, Kent County Council, Gravesham, Dartford Borough Council, just to raise awareness, obviously, around the vaccination program and to encourage as many people as possible to take the vaccine, and those obviously who have not had the opportunity yet to take the vaccine to stay safe. So that's a message that we're trying to push out. And some of you would have seen the video at the beginning, which we've done with faith groups based in Gravesham. And this follow-up video is something we've worked with Dartford Borough Council and local faith and community organisations in Dartford.
We've made it through the difficult bit.
We've stayed at home.
And not hugged our loved ones.
We've washed our hands.
And wore our masks.
Now it's time to wrap this up.
And get back to life before the pandemic.
We must protect ourselves.
And each other.
So trust the science.
And get the vaccine.
Together, we are.
One community.
One Dartford.
We can all make a difference.
Fantastic message. Now, if you've attended any of our offline or online events before, you'll know that we are always keen to showcase local artists. And I'm delighted to introduce a performance by the talented young people from the Grand right here in Gravesham.
It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today.
You may say I'm a dreamer,
but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one.
Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for.
No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer,
But I'm not the only one.
I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can.
No need for greed or hunger.
A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one.
Thank you very much. Just going to be closing off very shortly. Just to let colleagues know, the next online event we're doing for Stephen Lawrence Day is taking place on April 22nd. And I'm delighted we were working with partners, including the Grand, and the young people featuring that song will be part of the event we're doing April 22nd. Further information will be out shortly. Thank you very much for supporting us with the Commonwealth Day celebrations. And let's leave the last word to my colleague, Michelle. And just to let you know, we will be sharing this online very shortly, and we'll send it through a link. But thank you very much for your ongoing support.
Thank you for joining us again, everyone. And it would be remiss for me not to mention the women that inspire me on International Women's Day. The first being my mum, Kent's first black female magistrate. And the second being Sonia, who you don't get to see, but who keeps Govinda and I looking very smooth when things are going very crazy behind the scenes. As Govinda said earlier, it's important to celebrate the strength of the Commonwealth and to continue to support each other during times of uncertainty. So thank you for supporting us today. And if you have got time, please stay online to see some of the images from our previous events. Stay safe and well, everyone, and happy Commonwealth and International Women's Day.